Data protection and privacy teams are under more pressure than ever with new laws, AI oversight, data breaches, and the constant expectation to do more with fewer resources.
That's why TrustArc built a modern privacy and data protection management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. It unifies your tools, automates the work that slows you down, and surfaces what matters most right when you need it.
From guided quick actions to our intelligent assistant, Ask Arc, you get credible, contextual answers backed by expert research, not generic AI guesses.
Finally, privacy that works the way privacy pros work.
Learn how TrustArc helps teams move faster with confidence at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.
This is Serious Privacy. Here are your hosts, Paul Breitbart and Kay Royal.
Welcome to the 150th episode of Serious Privacy. Time flies when having fun, and I think all of you realize that working in data protection is great fun. And to celebrate this milestone, we have invited a special guest to join us this week, Wojciech Wiewiorowski. Of course, you will know that Wojciech is currently the European Data Protection Supervisor. He was appointed in December 2019 for a 5-year term, having served as the assistant EDPS in the 5 years before, while the late Giovanni Buttarelli was at the helm. And before that, Wojciech was the chair of the Polish DPA since 2010. He has a long background working on privacy, data protection, electronic governance, and many more topics, working both in the public sector and in academia at Gdansk University. So we are very excited to have him on the show this week. My name is Paul Breitbart.
And I'm Kay Royal, and welcome to Serious Privacy. We were just talking to him about how I think I met him at IAPP last year in 22, and Paul was not there.
I wasn't.
And yes, I'm going to get to the unexpected question. But I think I walked up and everybody was surrounding you. And all I asked was, can I take a quick selfie to send to Paul to tell him that I met you? And I think I did, but I didn't want to take much of your time. So welcome and thank you so much. We are absolutely delighted to have you as our guest for our 150th episode. That's special.
Thank you very much. I'm honored and happy as well. And I will be happy to answer all your questions and to explain how this European point of view looks like.
Very good.
We love it. So, okay, unexpected question. What was the last movie you watched?
The question is in the movie theater or at TV or...
Either, because I know a lot of us watch movies on TV now too, more so than we used to.
That's true. I have to say that I haven't been in movie theater for a while. So that will be quite difficult for me to remind what was the movie that I saw. If you think about the movies that I watch at the moment in the TV, I decided to come back to the series, which was presented years ago, more than 20 years ago, and which is called West Wing. So I was West Wing last few weeks. I'm still in the third season, but I'm going to watch it again and to find out how this administration was expected to work 20 years ago.
We love West Wing.
Yeah, I've wrapped up a rerun of West Wing probably somewhere late last year. So also I am a fan, and I love the episode where there is also talk about privacy being the issue.
Yes.
For the first part of the 21st century.
Yes.
Yep. All right, Paul, what was the last you watched?
I also have no idea what I saw last in cinema, but watching at home, probably it was Mamma Mia 2.
Ooh.
Which was on TV sometime in the past couple of weeks. And I zapped past it, heard some of the songs, and then before you knew it, the movie was over. And that's what you get with all the ABBA songs, right? It makes you happy, easy to sing along. Nobody should hear me singing along with those.
Nobody ever wants to hear me singing, trust me. The last one I went to was actually in the theater, and it was John Wick 4.
That's very aggressive, right?
Yes, but it's so aggressive, it's over the top, and I find myself busting out laughing at most of the really violent scenes. But they had wonderful, wonderful actors in it. It was really good, but it is so over the top. I just can't help but laugh through most of the bloodiest scenes there.
Okay, well, I would say let's move to privacy instead of bloody movie scenes.
Let's go to bloody privacy. How about that?
Wojciech, I think most people do realize you are the EDPS, but I think a lot of people do not realize what it is that the EDPS actually does. I think they see a lot of your opinions and maybe some press statements, but can you maybe tell, to start off, what it is actually that the role of the EDPS entails?
The European Data Protection Supervisor is the data protection authority of the EU institutions, bodies, and agencies. That means that apart from 27 jurisdictions that you have in Europe, with 27 countries of the EU and 3 countries of the European Economic Area, which are all in the European Data Protection Board, there is also one other jurisdiction, a little bit virtual, which is linked with the organs, with the institutions and agencies of the EU. So if you come to Brussels and you have the problem with the shop or with the hotel, you go to the Belgian Data Protection Authority, because they are responsible for any complaints that you would have on Belgian soil.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the problems with the European Parliament, European Council, the Commission, or any agency, no matter if it's located in Brussels or wherever else in Europe, then the Data Protection Authority is the EDPS, European Data Protection Supervisor. But I think that for today's discussion also, what is more important is our second duty, which is that we are main advisor in the legislative process in the European Union. Our friends from the national data protection authorities, supervisory authorities, are doing the same in the legislation on the national level. So they are advising their governments, their parliaments, when the law is created. And our role is to follow it from the very first draft from the European Commission, because that's the only institution that can file the draft of the law, through the work in the Council and in the Parliament, until the very end and until the implementation in the implementing act. So that would be our second role. And the third role is that we are also providing the secretariat for the European Data Protection Board. And the European Data Protection Board is the group of data protection authorities that are trying to harmonize the ways that we introduce and enforce data protection law in Europe. And we are the member of this body, but also providing the secretariat to it.
That's a lot.
It is. And for those of us outside Europe, explain to me how one, or explain to our listeners, well, and me, how does one become the European Data Protection Supervisor?
That's an open competition. So everybody can try to run for that. That's a 5-year term. And every 5 years, there is an open competition where this is not the proposal of the member state. These are not the governments who nominate. Simply everybody who thinks that he or she is good enough to do this job can apply. Then there is a series of selections done by the European Commission on the mainly professional ground. And finally, the shortlist is created. And this shortlist of candidates is sent to the Parliament and to the Council. And the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union are making the decisions themselves, and they go to the common accord on who to choose for this position. So there is a hearing in the European Parliament where the parliamentarians can ask the questions, and the hearing in so-called COREPER, which is the representation of the governments of the member states. And there is a separate voting in the Parliament, separate voting in the Council. If the results are the same, we have the European Data Protection Authority chosen. The first one was Peter Hastings from the Netherlands for 10 years.
Right.
Then for 5 years, this role was played by Giovanni Buttarelli, and now it's me.
So you can have it for more than one appointment term.
Yes, there are 2 appointment terms when you can perform this duty.
Nice. Very nice. Thank you.
And that also brings a lot of consistency. So Wojciech, if you are legislative advisor, you are officially the legislative advisor on all things data protection to the European Commission, the European institutions, especially also Parliament. But I also see a lot of legislative advice coming from the European Data Protection Board, sometimes also a joint legislative advice. How do you decide who advises on what, or when you do it together?
It's not the decision, let's say, of the EDPS or EDPB. EDPS has always the right to advise and is using this right when the legislative actions are taken. The only exemption is the adequacy decision. That's also the legal act, adequacy decision. Adequacy decision is done only by EDPB. And if we think about EDPB, European Data Protection Board, they can be invited by the legislator, by the commission, not by the legislator, but by the drafter of the draft, can be invited to take the opinion as well, especially in those situations where the legislation will have the impact on the market and impact on the national solutions that may differ one from another. We usually decide with the EDPB and EDPS decide to issue joint opinion. But sometimes we do it the way that more general opinion is done by the EDPB and the one that is covering these national divergences that may exist. And EDPS is then going to the more detailed opinion. That has never been competing opinions of the EDPS and EDPB, but we try at least to divide the subjects that we are dealing with. As I said, the EDPS is by default the supervisory authority of the public sector, because these are only the institutions, bodies, and organs of the European Union. So when something is especially about the market influence, then we do it together with EDPB.
Okay. I never realized that, even though I've been part of the predecessor of the EDPB, of course, but that distinction never struck me.
It is actually written quite precisely in the General Data Protection Regulation, a little bit more elaborated in the second regulation, the regulation which is dealing with the data protection in the EU institutions, but that's GDPR that says what is the division of roles between PS and EDPB.
So what are the topics you are currently most concerned about when it comes to how our data is processed?
That's not surprising that the list of the topics that we are dealing with is created by three main subjects, the three main factors, I may say. The first factor is the legislative strategy of the EU institutions, especially the Commission. The second are the complaints that we are receiving. And the third, the topics which are on the top of the agenda of the newspapers, television, and media. So sometimes the topics like ChatGPT at the moment are on the top of the agenda, so everybody has to take care of that. We have to take care of the harmonized approach to that among the data protection authorities. But generally, at the moment, that's the legislative actions that we are doing in the European Union, which are the most that are making the most of our work as EDPS. And that means actually that on the ground of the General Data Protection Regulation, which is kind of basis for everything, foundation of everything, we have the more policy-oriented legal acts, which are right now on the table. We have already Digital Services Act or Digital Market Act, but we are still working on Artificial Intelligence Act, on Data Act, on the whole bunch of topics which are right now in the works of the European Parliament and the European Commission. That's from this legislative perspective. If we think about the complaints look different from country to country. They look also different in the European Data Protection Supervisor or the supervisor of the institutions. Most of our ones are dealing with the law enforcement authorities and with the actions between the employees and employers, because our institutions are at the same time employers for the people whose data are processed. So these are not only the actions which are triggered by the plaintiffs from outside the EU institutions, but also the ones from inside. And for the EDPS, for the obvious reasons, this law enforcement sector with the Europol, so agency which is dealing with the data provided by the police, but also Eurojust, European Public Prosecutor's Office, staff which is dealing with the financial issues of the European Union, or the other agencies of this sector. They are the most complicated ones that we are dealing with. But we also have to have quite a good information and updated knowledge about the agencies, like, for example, Fusion for Energy, which is building thermonuclear reactor in southern France. Wow. So these are really, really very different topics, one from another.
So yeah, you get to experience the whole range of topics that the European Union is actually dealing with through all the oversight mechanisms that you have, from plant variety to indeed nuclear fusion, as you just referenced.
Yes, indeed. Some years ago, EDPS was dealing with a bunch of the legislations which were connected with data protection. Now everything is connected with data, and most of the data can be personal.
Right.
So it then means that our number of opinions quadrupled last few years. It's 4 times more than it was.
And what is the relationship between you and the board?
What do you mean by relations? Do we like each other? Yes, we do. Do we discuss? Do we discuss? Yes. Do we argue? Yeah, it happens as well. Because the whole story about the negotiations in the European Union and the discussion in the European Union is a big art of compromise, big art of getting to the common solution where you don't have binary choice. There is no black and white. There is no blue and red. There are at least 27 opinions of 27 countries. And of course, it might be even more complicated if you take the German position of 16 land with 17 local and 1 federal authority. So it can be complicated. But I can say that when in 2010, I was going to the first meeting of the Working Party of Article 29, the predecessor of the EDPB, I was very skeptical. Paul was also the member of this body, so he can somehow assess it. I was really skeptical because I could understand and imagine these 27 persons, with 28 persons at this time, with very high ego, trying to be independent, especially independent one from another. So I thought there is no way to get a decision in this study. And we started to do work. The topic that I was working on was the opinion on consent. And I was sure that it's not possible to have the one voice on this topic from so many participants of the discussion. And in half a year, we did the opinion. And that's all this story about the work of the European Data Protection Board. Yes, we argue. Yes, we have different opinions. Yes, sometimes we have to vote. Quite often we have to vote for the final text or for small topics that are in the opinion or in any kind of other document prepared by the European Data Protection Board. But what I find very nice and very, very important is that when the voting is done and some of the data protection authorities lost in this voting, some of them lost by very small margin, they will never say, this is not our opinion. They will say, this is opinion of the European Data Protection Board. So if you ask me what is the relation between us and EDPB, we are the members of EDPB as the other supervisory authorities. And the fact that we are providing the secretariat is not playing that big role in our relations, because we try to divide the people who are working for EDPB, let's say technically as the secretariat, and those who work as the representatives of EDPS.
Very nice. And your way of by the way, as a side note, your way of, and it's the opinion of the board, even if people disagree before the vote is taken, vastly different from American politics.
I can imagine, but it's not said that you cannot have your own opinion. That's rather a kind of respect. It happened probably 3 times that the Data Protection Authority decided, please write down in the minutes that we've been abstaining or we've been against, because it's important because of some discussion which is going on in our country. But these are 3 exemptions among hundreds of decisions that are making in the votes.
Yeah, very, very well working together. How did you get involved with data protection?
That's a long story. And if we have less than 2 hours, I will not be able to touch the most important part.
We have time. Go ahead.
Let's start from the fact that when I was in my law studies in the beginning of 90s, there was no subject like data protection law, because there was no data protection law in my country of origin, in Poland. Moreover, there was no subject European law, because we were not the members of the European Union either. Actually, when I was starting my studies in 1990, that was the first year where we are more or less democratic country, just after the changes in the Eastern Europe. We knew what we are heading for, but we didn't know that it will look like it looks at the moment. So I did my law degree in Gdańsk, in the University of Gdańsk, and I started to work in the university in the constitutional law department. That was
Okay.
it was interesting for me. But at the same time, I started to work for the IT company. And in this
Ooh, okay.
I started to work on the information retrieval systems. So the systems which are collecting information about the law. And that was the moment where this company already had most of the statutory law in the system, most of the case law, or at least they knew how to deal with it. And they wanted to find something new, something interesting, something that would make their product special. And one of the ideas was to find out everything which is in public domain, all registers, journals, official journals, and etc., and try to find the information about the people.
No, of course. Yes. Okay.
And try to prepare the product which will say to our clients who are their clients, who are their contractors, how they are somehow connected one with another. And my role was to make a logic for these studies. So I actually started as a kind of data miner. Of course, that was data mining of 90s, so that was different than today. But it was fun. It was really fun. Apart from the fact that I learned a lot, it was really something interesting to know about the people, the things that they probably didn't know about themselves. They didn't know how they wanted to connect with each other.
And so started the downfall.
And in 1998, 1987 actually, my country had first data protection law. And I found out that some of the things which I thought are probably a little bit non-ethical, maybe not even non-ethical, they might be illegal. And that first contact with the data protection law as such, which I was later on working both in academia in the laboratory of legal informatics, and then in public administration, first for the Ministry of Interior, and first as the political advisor in the Ministry of Interior, then as the head of the department. And in 2010, when I was running for the Data Protection Authority, for Data Protection Commissioner, NGO, which was doing the monitoring of this process, said, well, probably this guy knows a lot about data, but isn't it funny that somebody who is the high clerk in the Ministry of Interior is going to pretend that he's going to help with the human rights right now? And I remember this question until today, because actually, right, that was strange. They asked me this question during the monitoring process, and I answered them, whom do you want to get? Do you want to get somebody from the business who does it for money? Or who you want to get somebody who is from academia and who only theoretically know how it should look like? Now you have somebody who works in the academia, who had his work in the business, and who thinks he understands what the fundamental rights are. So that is more or less how I went into the data protection. But I would also not underestimate the fact that in the student times, in the university, I was the member of the European Law Student Association. And the European Law Student Association had a philosophy statement saying in its vision that they want to build just world where there is a respect for human dignity and cultural diversity. And that's still what I think is a kind of vision that I want to realize.
Wow. Impressive.
Very much so. Wojciech, you have been talking a little bit before about the whole European data package that is currently being negotiated, in part already adopted and entered into force with Digital Service and Digital Markets Act, but also the AI Act and the Data Act. Virtue also raised some concerns relating to this whole package. Can you share some of those concerns also with our listeners?
Of course, there are different concerns. There are concerns which are connected with the whole legal act. Is it really important and is it really necessary? That was what we said about Data Governance Act, for example, that we don't find the added value of this act, but it was passed. There might be the situation where we disagree with some of the solutions, and there might be the situation where we are surprised that some solutions are taken into consideration by the legislator. But let's say the biggest challenge for us is definitely the regulatory landscape. So all this matrix of different duties that we have, different authorities that are created, different opinions and different forms in which they form their opinion or their decisions. So that will be a kind of challenge, definitely, and we'll have to work on that. Not a new challenge, not something which never existed, but quite complicated. As I said, sometimes we have the doubts about the legal act as a whole, but sometimes our opinions are not followed by the legislator.
So many questions I want to ask that are not probably appropriate to ask, so I'm not going to. I'm going to exercise some discretion here. But if you had what you wanted, what would be your biggest priority right now?
I think the biggest priority would be to be ready for the situation when we will try to go to the real man-to-computer interface. So the situation where we will start to combine human being with the dignity of human being, with the resources which are available. And this is the next step, which is just not far away from us. And even the discussion about artificial intelligence of this understanding that we have at the moment is just the preparation to the more difficult topics that we will discuss in a few years. It's probably not me who will be discussing that, but in the university, I'm preparing those people who will be discussing about transhumanism, but transhumanism in practice. Yeah, maybe a kind of virtualization of the personality, virtualization in the very digital meaning of these words, and probably singularity. But I'm not going to discuss about it as the theoretical topics. I rather would like to prepare the soil and the background for this discussion when it comes.
Oh, I like that very much, preparing for the future. Do you find that you have to engage or would like to engage experts in certain areas?
Yes, definitely. The engaging experts, that's the normal way of working by the data protection authorities. We cannot have them all on board. It's not possible. You cannot have, even in such a big authority as our one with 150 people, or even in the UK authority, which has 500 people on board, you cannot have the specialists in everything. It's simply not possible. You have to learn part of the things, but you have to know where to look for the knowledge. So that's why we take part in the different kind of forums, different kind of platforms, different kind of conferences that are making us a little bit more open for the ideas going from outside. Yes, experts are the soil of our work, and the soul of our work is the cooperation with the NGOs, with the non-governmental organizations,
right,
that are sometimes biggest specialists in the topic. And it has been proved many times that this external knowledge is actually more vast than the work of the governments that change, the politicians that change. There's an old saying in the universities that rectors change. The ladies in the rector's office are still staying the same. So it's often like that here as well. You have different politicians, but the experts around are the ones that you will have to use all the time.
Yeah, that is very true. And talking about politicians, this Wednesday also, when we release this episode, you will presenting the annual report of the EDPS to the European Parliament.
Yes, all the data protection authorities are generally expected to have such a report to the Parliament in the member state or in the European Union.
So what was 2022 like for the EDPS?
Well, it was eventful, definitely. That was the year when we had to tell that, the COVID time is somehow over, in the meaning that, that the emergency time is over. So now we have to decide what out of this emergency was emergency tool, and we should also drop it. Mm-hmm. And what did we learn? What topics which we did probably good or probably bad in the COVID times should stay or should vanish. So that was the time of the final decisions in this field. But as I said, that was also the time of the discussion about the market, digital market, both with Digital Market Act and Digital Services Act, but also the year of artificial intelligence in many forms.
Right.
After that, that was also the year of the important investigations in the EDPS, especially the investigation on the commission use of the cloud services, which was probably the most important one that we had. But also the year where for the first time we issued binding decision against Europol, ordering them to delete data. And also the year when for the first time we sued European legislator to the Court of Justice, saying that the changes in the Europol regulation done by the Parliament and by the Council are actually against the treaties. So what?
So not heavy matters at all.
Not, but we have to remember that for the people who are sending the complaints to us, these are very high-level topics. While what is the most important is their very case that they have to solve, and which is sometimes solved by many data protection authorities at the same time.
I can only imagine. What is the part of the work that you're most proud of?
What I'm the most proud of, that's not a fair question, because it's not me to assess. I can say that what the institution is proud is the fact that we've shown that we have teeth as a data protection authority, that we can issue the decision and solve the problem. But at the same time, we've shown many times that we are pragmatic. So we don't want to be on the top of the newspapers. We don't want to be in the headlines of the TV or on the very big discussions on social media. What is important for us is that personal data protection and privacy. Sometimes you have to do it with the big words said in the big place, and sometimes it's better to do it in the practical but well-working way. So we had strong decisions sometimes, difficult decisions. Not all of them were in the top of the newspapers, but we are proud of the fact that we were enforcing, because enforcement is the most important part of the work of the supervisory authority. And that's also for us something to remember about. Otherwise, we will have this famous quote from one of the representatives of the tech who said that the definition of hell is the European law with American enforcement. Not that
I don't think we can get better than that.
But we don't want to create the hell for the data controllers. We want to create the place where we can trade the data, we can make the data flowing, but we are just cutting off all the bad ways of dealing with it. So we want the flow of data. We just don't want to. We just want to do it in the civilized way. We have to remember that General Data Protection Regulation is not only about data protection, but also about free data flow.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the core issues that many people forget when they talk about enforcement action by data protection authorities. It is not just about saying no to companies. It is about making sure that data can actually flow, but that it flows in the right way.
That's true, but we also said in our annual report that we should not be afraid as data protection authorities to set limits. Mm-hmm. Fundamental rights are setting the limits to some of the things. Yeah. So you can have the trade, but you cannot sell the people. You cannot sell the human cargo. And in the same way as we in maritime law wants to travel with goods, but not necessarily with slaves, we want to have the flow of data between the different economies, between different countries, different controllers, but not the way that would exclude the dignity of the people whose data is in question.
Very profound.
No, and I fully agree. When we look ahead, there is of course a lot of discussion about international transfers. The EDPB has given its opinion. We are waiting for the Commission to hear what they will say and what they will do in adopting the final adequacy decision for the EU-US data protection framework, of data privacy framework. But there are many more jurisdictions, and it seems that every jurisdiction right now is developing their data protection laws, which I think is a good thing. But especially for companies, that also brings the additional burden of how are we going to deal with all those data transfer requirements and limitations while doing our business, while respecting those fundamental rights. What will the interoperability of data protection laws look like in a couple of years from now? Will it become, in your view, more difficult, or will we find solutions?
Well, you ask several questions at the same time. Well, let's start with the fact that the mere fact that there are many countries that are taking the new data protection law and even comprehensive data protection law is not the holy grail for us. The mere fact that the country has the data protection law, comprehensive one, and even strong data protection authority does not mean too much. Mm-hmm. Because if we look at the famous map of countries with the comprehensive data protection law, we see that Russia has a data protection law, and China has a comprehensive data protection law, and USA does not have one. So what does it mean? Does it mean that Russia and China are far more stable and safe place to deal with the data than USA? Of course, it's not. So the mere fact that you have formal requirements for that in your law does not mean that much. That it's important, but this is definitely not decisive. But you ask about interoperability of the systems. I would say I don't really like the word interoperability here. That's probably caused also by the fact that my previous life, before data protection, I was dealing with interoperability of the governmental services in the European Union, so-called e-government and its interoperability. We like to talk about convergence. Interoperability sounds a little bit like finding the lowest common denominator. And this is not what we are going to do. We would like to have the comprehensive or the convergence of the legal systems that are achieving the goals, achieving the standard which is acceptable. So not pure interoperability, not pure sending the data from one place to another where you can find the legal grounds for processing the data. That's also semantic. We have to understand it the same way. We have to organizationally be prepared. And first of all, it has to be of the good quality. So in this sense, I rather prefer the discussion which is going on in Council of Europe or OECD than the discussion that is moving to G20, for example, because G20 is also Russia and China, which are definitely not the places where we can think about the interoperability with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I fully understand that. But indeed, a lot of time, especially from the business, the call is on interoperability. But I fully respect your view, of course, as one of our key regulators in the European Union. To a large extent, I also think I would agree with you, by the way.
Europe understands interoperability a little bit broader, saying that this is not only interconnectivity, it's not only the level which is legal level, but also semantic. So we understand it the same way, organizational, cultural, and finally political. And political interoperability is also an important thing. But as I said, we prefer the word convergence, reaching the same good standard.
I like that.
And that's something we'll need to do a lot of work to that stage. Kay, any final question?
You can somehow. There are a lot of situations where we had to deal with the completely different systems. And once again, probably this is biased by the fact that I come from the harbor town Gdansk. But look at maritime law. These people were doing the system that should work all over globe, that would enable the ship, which was built in Korea, out of the wood, to park in the ports, which were built in the US, and then to use the containers later on in the history, to use the containers which were built in the Netherlands in the port in Australia.
I love that comparison.
Yeah. So when we asked you to come on, and thank you so much for doing so, was there anything you wanted to make sure that you were able to share with our audience that we haven't touched on?
Well, I think that the most important thing that we have to remember about is that the whole story about data protection, whole story about the privacy protection is not the story about data. It's a story about the people who are over this data. We are not protecting data. We are not data protection authorities that are seen to be the guardians of the resources or guardians of the attributes. We should remember that this all comes from the dignity of the human being, and the human being has to be in the middle of our discussion.
Amen to that.
There you have it.
And on that note, thank you everybody for listening to another episode of Serious Privacy, number 150. If you like our series, please do tell your friends and colleagues about us. Rate and review our episodes in your favorite podcast app or on your favorite platform. And should you have any questions or suggestions, join the conversation on LinkedIn via Serious Privacy. You will find Kay on Twitter and social media via Heart of Privacy and myself as Paul B. Wojciech, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.
And see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye, y'all.
That was Serious Privacy.
If you're a data protection or privacy professional, you already know the pressure. Non-stop regulatory change, AI oversight, internal demands, and the expectation to somehow stay ahead of it all. And the old patchwork of tools just isn't cutting it anymore.
No. That's why TrustArc created a modern privacy management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. The TrustArc platform brings your workflows, evidence, research, tasks, and applications all together in one unified and intelligent workspace so you don't waste time digging, clicking, or context switching.
With Ask Arc, your privacy assistant, you can ask plain language questions about laws, jurisdictions, or even your own program data and get credible, cited answers based on NIMBY research and more than 1,000 global laws. It's explainable, transparent, and purpose-built for data protection and privacy.
So if you need to add a vendor, create a cookie banner, or start an assessment, quick actions take formally complex tasks, turn them into bite-sized guided workflows to save you time.
It's a platform that thinks like you, works like you, and helps you move faster with confidence, whether you're a seasoned DPO or you're just getting started.
See how modern privacy gets done. Explore Arc at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.